Welcome to 10-Minute Tuesdays, EduPlanet's series of conversations with experts in education. My name is Taylor Parks, and I lead our customer success team. We've had the pleasure of talking to Phil about integrating UBD and habits of mind and performance tasks. Today, we'd like to talk about rubrics. Welcome back, Phil.
Always a pleasure to speak to you, Taylor.
From your perspective, when creating a rubric, what should be the goal there?
Okay, so with analytic rubrics, really the goal is of course we want to evaluate the student's performance in terms of performance expectations, but it's also very important to be able to give constructive feedback. So, what have the students done well and what are the areas for growth? And furthermore, really, it's that guiding light for them to be able to refine the work as they go along, to self-assess, to self-reflect, and also to goal set.
So talk to me a little bit about those three kind of main concepts. Make a lot of sense, and I think are setting the kids up for success there. But I'm curious, how do you go about developing a rubric like that? And I'm also curious, do you share your rubrics with your students in advance?
Okay, so I'll kind of maybe answer that in reverse. The first thing that every unit opens with is the performance task and the rubric.
Great,
so
love it.
Students absolutely know the reason why they're learning all this stuff in the first place. They know where this is heading. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then your next question, how do we approach this? Okay, so first of all, if you think about it, you can have as many criteria in your rubric as you want, and you're still, or could be, still assessing the same things. So, okay, what do I mean by that? So you can have a holistic rubric, a one-line criteria. So it's just essentially, to what extent is this piece of work good? So what does it say? Does it meet that? Then you tend to find that your performance descriptors within that one line are rather large.
Right.
Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you could actually have hundreds of lines of criteria. So you could atomize that to the extent that you've individually assessing every piece of knowledge, every skill, every understanding, every cognition. Okay, but it becomes somewhat unwieldy if you approach it like that. So it appears to me that if what we are trying to assess is transfer, then it makes sense to have one line of criteria for every long-term transfer goal that you are trying to assess.
Yep.
So whether as a school you have developed subject-specific long-term transfer goals, or like CIA First, we've actually developed overarching long-term transfer goals, that's where we have decided to pitch it, to have one criteria per long-term transfer goal, because it's the transfer that we're actually trying to measure.
Yeah.
Now we get into a very interesting topic, which is transfer actually measurable? So then we get into the concept of the latent variable. So transfer is a hypothetical construct. So if we think of it in terms of other latent variables, such as maybe happiness, well-being, perhaps business confidence, all of these things, we understand them and then they make sense in our discourse, but arguably they can't be measured directly, okay? Or how about love? So, let's say that we may not be able to directly measure how much Taylor loves her partner. Okay, but what we could probably do is look at a bunch of behaviors that are observable, and then we will be able to measure those. So if we can think about transfer in the same way as that, then I think that it is measurable.
Okay.
So if we're looking at transfer as a latent variable that's made up of a lot of factor variables, what are those factor variables? Well, we know that the factor variables are the knowledge, the skills, the understandings, and the habits of mind that are needed to transfer to solve this problem. But I do want to touch on one more point. There is also a difference, okay, between measuring or assessing or evaluating these stage 1 goals in isolation and then in terms of the transfer to the performance task. So going back to one of my examples, the students could demonstrate understandings about the advantages and disadvantages of different types of government. So in the advantages and disadvantages of the republic versus the empire, for example. And that's fine, that's showing that abstract understanding. But that's not the same as then transferring those enduring understandings into the context of the USA and the current problems. So what we should be assessing there is all of those factor variables, but in the sense of how well the student has been able to transfer them to solve the problem at hand.
Well, and what I'm hearing, and I know this is by design, but I'm seeing here in your kind of story, you've got your transfer and your stage 1 and everything that you've really built here, which is shared with the students as well. And then you've arrived at your performance tasks, which are there to measure those transfer goals, right? And your rubrics have that all built in, so it all kind of loops it back and ties it all together. A question came to mind while you were talking there too about deep rubric development. So I'm curious, do you ever get input from students?
So here we get into the nice synergy between understanding by design, habits of mind, and then personalized learning. So if you look at the work that Benna is doing with Alison, I think it's fantastic. So that's a very new initiative at CIA First. It's something that we're going to be passionate about implementing over the next 3 years. And that is moving from teacher-generated to co-created to student-created. So if you look at those wonderful soundboards that Alison and Benna has created, definitely, getting the students to develop their own rubrics based on our school-wide learner outcomes is something we're looking at. Also, even, developing their own essential questions as well to guide their own inquiry through the unit.
Well, I'm really looking forward to supporting CIA First along the journey and watching you guys go through all of that. That's going to be really exciting. It's nice to learn a little bit more about your future. Yes. I appreciate you sharing everything about performance task development, your rubrics. Is there any other suggestions or recommendations that you'd like to share?
I just try to make the performance tasks as relevant to the students' lives as possible, because all the research indicates that if the students find it meaningful, if they can relate it to their own situations, they're going to be far more engaged in the topic and far more passionate about learning.
That makes sense. Great advice. All right. Well, thank you, Phil, for sharing your insights. And Phil has been kind enough to share a sample rubric, which you can access on our website at eduplanet21.com. So thanks so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Taylor.